Alabama, December 1862. Within half a year, their hands had taken the lives of 20 white men, consumed 3 plantations valued beyond $200,000 in flames, and unshackled 53 souls from bondage. The mobile gazettes had christened them the Death Couple. Across 3 counties, plantation masters now sought slumber with loaded rifles beneath their beds. Mothers, in the grip of fear, barred their children indoors once dusk descended. From pulpits, sermons thundered, branding them as fiends unleashed from the very maw of hell. The bounty upon their heads had swelled to $3,000, a sum equating to 60 enslaved lives, 3 humble farms, or 5 years' toil for a master craftsman. Every tracker of bounties, every catcher of those who yearned for freedom, and every impoverished white man in Alabama, driven by despair, now scoured the land for them. And now, in the heart of the Tensaw Swamp, a vast labyrinth where 60,000 acres of murky water and ancient cypress had claimed countless souls before their time, Captain James Morrison had drawn his net around them. 25 armed men solidified into a grim circle in the oppressive gloom. 16 bloodhounds, straining with savage intent, pulled at their leashes. 300 rounds of ammunition, death-ready, lay loaded. Solomon and Moriah, a defiant bulwark, stood back-to-back at the nucleus of that ominous ring, armed with 2 rifles, 4 pistols, and perhaps a mere 30 bullets to share. Their end, it seemed, was destined for this very night. Yet Morrison, in his certainty, had made one fatal miscalculation. He presumed they still clung to the desire for life. A hush fell upon the swamp, a silence too profound. Morrison, a figure carved from the shadows, raised a hand, halting the dozen men who trailed him. 2 decades spent tracking the absconded had etched this truth into his very soul. When a swamp breathes no sound, death itself lurks near. The crickets ceased their nightly chorus. The frogs, as if in dread, held their very breath. Even the ubiquitous mosquitoes vanished, leaving an unnatural void. Morrison's voice emerged, a hoarse whisper, roughened by the perpetual indulgence of pipe tobacco. He murmured to his men that their quarry was nigh, a proximity he could sense within his bones. The cloying scent of raw fear, mingling with the fetid breath of the swamp, clung heavy to the humid air. To his right stood Thomas Whitmore, Jr., heir to Monroeville's wealthiest plantation, clutching a Sharp's rifle, gleaming and new, acquired for this very pursuit. His father had pledged $2,000 for the couple's apprehension. Thomas, however, craved vengeance. These fugitives had claimed the lives of 11 of his father's trusted associates. One of Morrison's men, a trembling finger extended, pointed into the gloom ahead. Footprints in the mud, undeniably fresh, etched by 2 souls. The imprints remained yielding, still weeping moisture from the earth, urging his men onward. They waded into the viscous, muddy water which embraced their thighs, rifles held aloft. The swamp exhaled the ancient stench of decay, of moss and death, as if fermenting for a millennium. Colossal cypress trees, like sentinels of the underworld, devoured the moonlight. Twisted roots writhed from the murky depths, grimly reminiscent of drowning corpses, clawing for breath. 50 yards ahead, Morrison's gaze snagged upon a glint of metal, a necklace fashioned of copper, shaped like a heart. Morrison stooped, his fingers stretching towards the metallic gleam. The very ground beneath them erupted. Flames, unleashed from buried gunpowder sealed within glass bottles, clawed at the air. 2 men shrieked, their cries swallowed as the inferno consumed them. The remaining men scattered, discharging their weapons into the unseen. But Solomon and Moriah had already vanished, absorbed by the swamp, a labyrinth whose secrets they had painstakingly unraveled over 3 months. Morrison stood amidst the maelstrom, shrapnel tearing at his flesh, witnessing his carefully laid ambush crumble to dust. A chilling realization dawned upon him, blooming into horror. He was not the hunter. He was the prey. The question that scorched his mind was the same silent query tormenting every white soul in Alabama. How had 2 chattel, 2 souls held in chains, transformed into the most dreaded killers across 3 counties? The answer, an echo from 6 months prior, began with a moment of wrenching separation, destined to reshape the very fabric of southern Alabama and reveal how every edifice of oppression harbors the seeds of its own undoing. Camden, Alabama, June 1855. Solomon was but 11 years of age when Moriah was torn from him, though neither child grasped that this day would forever etch the course of all that followed. He was shaping horseshoes in the roaring forge when her scream pierced the metallic symphony. The sound, sharp and desolate, cleaved through the insistent clamor of metal upon metal. Solomon dropped his hammer, abandoning his work, and ran. By the time he burst into the yard, the wagon was already lumbering forward. Moriah, a child of 9 summers, stood in the wagon's rear, her hands clutching the wooden rail with such desperate force that her knuckles gleamed white as bone. Her mother, seated behind her, wore a countenance stripped bare by shock. Moriah did not weep. She had learned never to weep where white eyes might witness. She merely stared at Solomon, her eyes, like ancient wells, holding a depth of pain no 9-year-old soul should bear. Her lips moved, forming silent words. "Find me." 2 words, a command, a solemn promise, a whispered prayer. Solomon pursued the wagon, every sinew of his boyish frame propelling him forward. His bare feet hammered against the crimson dust of the road. His lungs burned with the fire of exertion. He screamed her name until his voice fractured into a raw croak, and tiny blood vessels burst in his straining throat. The overseers intercepted him before he could bridge the distance to the wagon. 4 grown men wrestled with one 11-year-old boy, whose struggles possessed a desperate primal strength. Chains bit into his young wrists. He fought, he kicked, he screamed. He bit one man with such ferocity that blood welled forth. They held him pinned to the earth as the wagon receded into a swirling cloud of dust. When at last they released him, 30 minutes hence, Solomon stumbled back toward the forge on legs that felt as insubstantial as wood. His hands trembled uncontrollably. His vision swam with unshed tears, tears he stubbornly refused to release. On the sun-baked earth, half interred in the crimson soil, he discovered the copper necklace. It had been lost amidst the desperate struggle. She had fashioned it but 3 days prior, hammered from discarded copper, bent into the tender shape of a heart. Somehow, she had foreknown the coming of their separation. Solomon lifted the necklace with trembling fingers, then clenched his fist around it so fiercely that its copper edges bit into his palm, drawing blood. In that raw moment, standing amidst the red dirt with his own blood upon his hands, something within him solidified, transforming into unyielding iron. He would find her, irrespective of the passage of time, irrespective of the man he must forge himself into. 7 years unfolded. Solomon burgeoned from a boy to a man, yet the copper necklace endured, a constant presence, concealed beneath his shirt, warm against his breast. The leather thong that bound it was replaced a myriad of times, but the copper heart itself remained immutable. By his 15th year, Solomon had become the most accomplished blacksmith in Wilcox County. Master Ashworth leased his labor to other plantations for the sum of $20 a week. Solomon never glimpsed a single penny of this sum, yet the toil bestowed upon him a treasure more precious than coin. It granted him a measure of movement, a semblance of liberty. It gifted him the means to search. Solomon plied his craft on farms stretching from Pineapple to Lower Peachtree, traversing a radius of 40 miles. He shod horses, he mended plowshares and the intricate mechanisms of cotton gins, and he listened, his senses ever alert. At every plantation he posed questions, subtle and deliberate. Had any whisper reached their ears of a Moriah sold from Camden in the year 1855? Had anyone encountered a girl with discerning eyes and nimble hands? For 6 long years his quest yielded naught but ephemeral rumors, fleeting possibilities that dissolved like the morning mist. Yet he never relinquished his search, nor ever removed the necklace. Sometimes in the shroud of night he would clutch it, conjuring memories of her voice, her laughter, the intricate maps she once traced in the dust. Then in the vernal month of March 1862, the currents of his life irrevocably shifted. The Civil War had by then convulsed the nation for a full year. White men departed by the hundreds, abandoning their posts to confront the Yankees. Plantations now suffered a dearth of overseers. The bonds of security had loosened. An old woman named Bess, a peddler of herbal remedies, journeyed to the Ashworth plantation. She drew Solomon aside, her words a hushed murmur. She had caught the echo of his persistent inquiries. and she bore tidings. There dwelt a girl in Monroeville, a seamstress at the Whitmore estate, sharp of wit, and named Maria. She, too, had been whispering questions, seeking a blacksmith named Solomon, a native of Camden. Solomon's hands froze in their labor. The hammer, suspended, hung motionless in the air. His heart, with a sudden violent surge, felt as though it might burst from his chest. He inquired if her certainty was absolute. Bess met his gaze with eyes that had witnessed the unfolding of 70 years of human suffering. She was as certain as the immutable earth beneath their feet. Solomon's trembling fingers brushed against the copper necklace hidden beneath his shirt. He had found her. Concurrently, in the quiet confines of Monroeville, Maria was meticulously charting a rebellion. She toiled 12 hours each day, stitching dresses for white women who, with endless complaints, critiqued the flawless work of her hands. Her fingers bled from the constant assault of needle pricks, her back ached with persistent protest, yet her mind never ceased its ceaseless machinations. She committed every detail to memory with exquisite precision. The patrol schedules, which shifted with predictable rhythm every Tuesday and Friday. The temperaments of each overseer, distinguishing the truly vicious from those who merely adhered to their prescribed duties. The disposition of every hound. The Tombigbee River lay 23 miles to the west, traversable by foot in 3 specific locations. The swamps near Purdue Hill, a treacherous expanse, were nonetheless navigable on foot, provided one possessed intimate knowledge of their hidden pathways. She learned that John Whitmore journeyed to Mobile once each month, and that his son Thomas drowned his Thursdays in drink. She meticulously charted which plantations offered a semblance of humanity versus those that were unadulterated hellholes. At night, she would recline upon her rough wooden boards and reverently touch the hollow where Solomon's necklace once rested. The phantom weight of it still lingered there. She wondered if life still coursed through his veins. 7 years felt an eternity. Lives extinguished, memories faded. But Maria, she never forgot. The image of Solomon's face was etched into her mind with the permanence of words carved into stone. When Master Ashworth dispatched Solomon to Monroeville in June of 1862, bearing cotton, it was merely the ordinary course of commerce. Solomon guided the wagon himself, unaccompanied by an overseer, for he had long proven himself dependable. They furnished him with a pass, attesting to his authorized journey. The white folk believed they could trust Solomon, for he had never sought escape. They were correct in their assessment that he had never fled, yet they were disastrously mistaken in their understanding of why Solomon had not run, for until now he had possessed no sanctuary to flee to. Now he did. The Whitmore plantation crowned a gentle hill, gazing down upon the serpentine little flat creek. Solomon guided his wagon into the estate yard in the late afternoon when the sun beat down with its most fervent heat. His gaze devoured every detail: the grand house, the sturdy barn, the humble quarters, the sewing house. And then he beheld her, emerging, a basket laden with fabric scraps cradled in her arms. She was 16 now, taller, slenderer, yet utterly unmistakable. Her hair was enveloped in a blue kerchief. She moved with a deliberate, gentle grace. At first, her eyes did not alight upon him. Solomon descended slowly from the wagon. His legs felt weighted, like inert wood. His heart thundered against his ribs. 7 long years. He called to her, his voice carefully devoid of emotion, lest watchful white ears discern their connection. Maria turned, drawn by the sound. Their eyes locked across 30 feet of crimson Alabama earth. For 3 suspended seconds, neither stirred. The very world seemed to tilt on its axis. Solomon witnessed recognition ignite upon her face, a fleeting flash like summer lightning. Then, Maria's basket, forsaking her grasp, tumbled to the ground. Scraps of fabric scattered like fallen petals. Her lips formed a single whispered word, spoken so softly that only he could apprehend it. You. Solomon touched his chest where the hidden necklace lay. Me. To speak then was impossible. Too many eyes kept their silent vigil. Solomon assisted in the unloading of cotton. Maria gathered the scattered fabric, but before she vanished from sight, she bestowed upon him a glance that conveyed an entire lexicon of meaning. Await tonight. That night, Solomon, a shadow among shadows, slipped through a loose board in the quarters. He moved like smoke, through the veil of darkness, towards the creek, employing every art of invisibility he had mastered over 7 arduous years. Mariah awaited him there, seated upon a fallen log. As she rose, he discerned the traces of tears upon her cheeks. For a suspended moment they simply gazed. 2 souls, who had been mere children when last they stood in such proximity. Then they folded into each other's arms. Solomon lifted her, weightless, from the earth. She buried her face in the hollow of his neck, and he felt the fresh warmth of her tears. When they finally drew apart, both wept, silently, in the manner that enslaved souls learn to shed tears without sound, their sorrow reflecting the moon's pale light. Mariah whispered that she had long believed him lost to death. Solomon whispered that he had feared she was sold to the distant lands of Mississippi. Mariah recounted that she had indeed come close to such a fate, that Whitmore had contemplated it, but ultimately deemed her too valuable to part with. They sat by the water's edge, lulled by the chorus of frogs and the soft hum of insects. Solomon drew the copper necklace from beneath his shirt, allowing it to hang visible, a silent declaration. For the first time in 7 years, Mariah gasped, a catch in her breath. Her trembling fingers extended, seeking to touch the metal she had shaped as a child of 9. "You kept it. Every day." Never removed it, save to replace the worn cord. Mariah's eyes welled anew with fresh tears. She touched it with a reverence bordering on awe, then raised her gaze, her eyes blazing with fierce determination. "We cannot remain here. We cannot endure this life any longer. We cannot remain chattel, owned by others." Solomon agreed instantly. "I know," he murmured. "I have always known. But a plan we must forge. Weapons we must acquire. For if we flee and are captured, death is our only certainty." Mariah produced a folded paper from a hidden pocket within her dress. She unfurled a map, painstakingly rendered from memory over many months. Roads, rivers, swamps, towns, and plantations, each marked with an astonishing precision. She indicated various features as she elucidated her scheme. Patrols shifted their routes every Tuesday and Friday. The hounds, sated at sunset, grew lethargic thereafter. The most propitious time for travel stretched from midnight until the first blush of dawn. The Tombigbee River lay 23 miles to the west, fordable in 3 locations, each marked with an X. Solomon studied the intricate map, a nascent admiration blooming within him. He had spent 7 years mastering the contours of the land. She had spent 7 years deciphering the patterns of their oppressors. Together, their combined knowledge constituted a deadly force. Together, they were perilous. "We need weapons," Solomon reiterated. Mariah had anticipated this need. A rifle lay secreted within the overseer's cabin. She knew the hiding place of its key. Pistols resided within the main house. Knives, she knew, could be readily purloined from the kitchen. "When do we embark?" Solomon inquired. Mariah's eyes, deep pools, held the distilled essence of 7 years of pain and meticulous planning. "Soon," she affirmed. "But first, we must practice. We must test the roots of our resolve. We must ensure our survival, for capture portends death, and death, the permanent severance of our bond." Over the span of 3 months, Solomon contrived reasons to journey to Monroeville an additional 6 times. Each visit, they converged in clandestine meetings after the midnight hour. With each rendezvous, they honed their plan to an obsessive degree of detail. Mariah instructed Solomon on the intricacies of patrol schedules, the vigilance of overseers versus their sloth, and the gaps in surveillance created by plantation boundaries. Solomon, in turn, imparted to Mariah the art of silent movement through the forest, how to tread upon roots rather than rustling leaves, how to use water to mask their scent from tracking dogs, and how to divine their path by the celestial tapestry of stars. She revealed hidden creek crossings, known only through generations of whispered, secret geography, not etched on any map. He demonstrated how to fashion snares for rabbits, how to discern edible plants amidst the wilderness, and how to conjure fire without betraying smoke. They were falling into the profound depths of love even as they meticulously plotted a war. Every clandestine meeting deepened both their affection and their resolve. They held hands, their fingers intertwined, as they gravely discussed methods to incapacitate tracking hounds. They kissed, their lips locked, even as their minds absorbed the locations of hidden ammunition. They made love against the rough bark of trees, even as they strategized which plantations would be the first to taste the flame. Yet their meticulous foresight was poised to be shattered by an eruption of violence, and the grim realization that further delay was an untenable luxury. September 1862. His name was William Carson, though all addressed him as Red for his rust-colored hair and face perpetually kissed by the sun's scorching embrace. For 12 long years, he had served as an overseer at Ashworth Plantation. A man of 43 years, 6 feet in stature and 200 pounds, his flesh softened by the insidious embrace of corn liquor. At his belt, he bore a bullwhip, coiled like a slumbering serpent. Carson harbored a virulent hatred for enslaved people, a venom born of a poor white man who possessed nothing save the dubious privilege of his skin. He had ascended from the abject squalor of poverty, carving his path to the overseer's post through unmitigated brutality. He boasted a fierce pride in never having lost a single enslaved person to successful escape. He reveled in the shattering of spirits. He gloried in the terror he inspired. Solomon had for years eluded Carson's notice by cultivating both utility and invisibility. But Carson, ever watchful, had discerned a subtle shift. Solomon, during his appointed journeys, was vanishing into the night, returning with pine needles entangled in his hair and the telltale mud of creek beds clinging to him. Carson uttered not a word. He merely watched, and he waited, with the patient cunning of a hunter tracking deer. In the month of September, he shadowed Solomon to Monroeville. That night, Solomon slipped from the quarters and followed the well-trodden path to Bear Creek. They were immersed in the delicate finalities of their escape plan when the approach of a horse breached the nocturnal quiet. The muffled thud of hooves on soft earth, the protesting creak of leather, the faint jingle of bit and bridle. Carson rode into the moonlit clearing, an apparition, like a demon summoned from the infernal depths. His horse was black, its form a darker void against the already inky sky. He dismounted with an unnerving slowness, savoring the chilling triumph of his discovery. "Well, well, well," he drawled, a cruel amusement in his voice. "Solomon has found himself a sweetheart." Solomon, by instinct, interposed himself before Maria. "We meant no harm, sir," he pleaded. "Leaving your quarters after dusk, meeting a girl from another plantation. Those are 2 transgressions, boy," Carson sneered. Maria attempted to shoulder the blame. "This is my fault, sir. I implored him to meet me. I was lonely." But Carson's gaze, predatory and chilling, slid to Maria, conjuring a sickness, cold as ice in Solomon's stomach. A slow, malevolent smile stretched across his features. "Lonely, is it? Perhaps I should offer you my company instead." He advanced toward her. Solomon moved, an impulsive blur, devoid of thought. 7 years of patient forbearance evaporated in that singular, explosive instant. He seized Carson's arm as the man reached for Maria. Carson's fist, propelled by 200 pounds of raw force, connected with Solomon's jaw. A galaxy of stars exploded behind his eyes. He crumpled. Carson's boots found his ribs, his stomach, his back, his kidneys. Each blow struck with a brutal, practiced precision. Solomon curled into a fetal ball, but it offered no quarter. Carson kicked him again and again, with a cruelty honed by habit. Maria shrieked and launched herself at Carson, her fingernails tearing at his face, drawing scarlet lines of blood. Carson's backhand struck her with such force that she was flung backward, her head striking the earth with a sickening thud. Carson loomed over Solomon, breathing heavily, wiping the blood from his cheek. "You have just earned yourself a whipping you shall never forget." He seized Solomon by the hair, dragging him toward his horse. He slung him across the saddle like cargo, binding his wrists so savagely that circulation ceased. Before riding away, Carson turned his gaze upon Maria, who lay bleeding in the dust. "Utter a single word of this, and I will sell your mama to the vilest plantation in all Mississippi. Do you comprehend?" Maria nodded, utterly powerless, compelled to witness Carson disappear with Solomon into the swallowing darkness. The whipping commenced with the dawn's first light. Carson desired maximum visibility, maximum witnesses, maximum deterrent effect. He roused Master Ashworth at 5 in the morning. Solomon had been apprehended meeting a girl from another plantation, had assaulted an overseer, and therefore required to be made an unequivocal example. They assembled all 143 enslaved souls to bear witness. This was the true purpose. Not merely retribution, but an act of terror. A stark reminder of power, of established order, and of its brutal consequences. They bound Solomon to the whipping post, its thick wood worn smooth by years of crimson sacrifice. His hands were bound high above his head, his arms stretched to their fullest painful extension. They tore his shirt from him. His back lay exposed, vulnerable. Carson cracked the bullwhip once into the air, a sound like a pistol shot. Some children, unable to suppress their fear, began to weep. Master Ashworth's voice boomed, declaring the sentence for all to hear. 40 lashes for leaving quarters and for assaulting an overseer. The second accusation was a fabrication, yet lies held no consequence when power itself dictated truth. Solomon's gaze sought out old Marcus in the assembled crowd. Marcus was already weeping, his face a mask of grief. Their eyes met for a fleeting second, and Solomon, through that silent communion, strove to convey that it was worthy, that he had found Moriah, that some truths demanded any sacrifice. Then the first lash descended, and all coherent thought fled. The whip cleaved Solomon's back, a brutal rending, like a knife tearing through cloth. Pain, white-hot and absolute, exploded across his shoulders. His vision dissolved into a blinding white. He screamed. By the 10th lash, his pleas were desperate. "Please, no more. I regret my actions. Anything." Shame would visit him later. In that harrowing moment, there was only the agony and the desperate primal urge for it to cease. By the 20th lash, his voice had abandoned him. Only choking sounds escaped his throat as his body convulsed uncontrollably. By the 30th lash, he had retreated into a profound silence. His mind had receded to a place deep within, where the full terror of the pain could not penetrate. Carson did not halt at 40. He continued to 50. The additional 10 lashes were meted out simply because he possessed the power, because he reveled in the act. For cruelty requires no justification when unchecked power obliterates all consequence. When they finally cut him down, his body collapsed, a broken puppet with severed strings. They bore him to the quarters, abandoning him upon wooden boards, to either mend or perish. Old Marcus remained at Solomon's side for 3 days, diligently applying tobacco poultices to stave off the insidious creep of infection, a testament to folk medicine, born of dire necessity. Marcus moistened a rag and pressed it to Solomon's lips, dripping life-sustaining water into his parched mouth. He assiduously kept the buzzing flies at bay. He prayed to a god whose very existence he doubted. On the 4th day, Solomon's eyelids fluttered open. The world swam before his eyes, a blurred tableau. Every fiber of his being screamed in agony. To breathe was agony. To think was torment. To simply exist was to suffer. Marcus's face sharpened into focus, the old man once more shedding tears. "I believed you were lost to us, boy," Marcus choked out. Solomon's voice emerged, a raw, painful rasp. "Where is the necklace?" Marcus retrieved it from his pocket. The leather cord, he saw, had been severed by a cruel lash. Solomon accepted it with trembling hands, pressing it against his chest, then uttered 3 words that chilled Marcus's blood to ice. "He will pay." Marcus cautioned him against such wild talk. To speak of vengeance against a white man was to invite certain death. But Solomon's eyes held a conviction, stark and terrifying, that chilled Marcus to the bone. He will pay with his blood, not in some distant future, soon. 3 weeks hence, Solomon could walk, though his back would forever bear the indelible marks of his torment. Scars, thick and ropey, now crisscrossed his skin. 5 weeks later he had returned to the forge, presenting the guise of the same obedient chattel. Yet he was irrevocably altered. Something within him had hardened, like iron plunged into cold water, forging an unyielding core. And he observed Red Carson each day, with the chilling patience of a predator stalking its prey. He honed a railroad spike into a weapon, a makeshift knife, laboring in the darkness of the forge, grinding metal against stone until it possessed an edge keen enough to slice leather. He tested its balance 100 times, familiarizing himself with its deadly heft. He made peace with the terrible transformation he was about to undergo. In Monroeville, Moriah received tidings of the brutal whipping from a traveling preacher. 50 lashes, a sentence from which one might not recover. Moriah, overwhelmed by a torrent of grief and rage, emptied her stomach. She retreated to the confines of the sewing house, weeping until her tears were utterly spent. Then, a fierce resolve solidified within her. They were no longer merely seeking escape. She desired war. She yearned for blood. She craved retribution for every soul who had erected their lives upon the suffering of others. October 15th, 1862. Red Carson, with unwavering ritual, succumbed to drink every Tuesday night. It was his sacred ritual, his earned reward. He would imbibe corn liquor from the descent of sunset until the midnight hour, then stumble his way toward the main house, where a second bottle awaited him. His path led him past the blacksmith shop, through 200 yards of impenetrable darkness, a space where any horror might unfold. Solomon waited in that profound darkness, with the unwavering patience of one who had meticulously counted every second of 3 agonizing weeks. He had charted Carson's routine with granular precision, down to the very minute. Carson, he knew, would stumble along the path at approximately 12 minutes past midnight, his voice slurring a song of a girl from Mobile. The sharpened railroad spike, his instrument of vengeance, lay concealed in Solomon's hand, its cold metal a stark contrast against his palm. He had positioned himself in the deepest, most suffocating shadows. At precisely 12:17, Carson came blundering down the path, just as predicted, his song slurred, his gait unsteady. Solomon emerged from the shadows. "Good evening, Mr. Carson." Carson squinted, his vision impaired by drink. "Solomon, what are you doing awake, boy?" "I could not find slumber. My back still aches. Do you recall my back?" Carson's hand instinctively reached for the whip at his belt, but it was not there. Solomon drove the sharpened railroad spike into Carson's throat with the full accumulated force of his being. The metal pierced flesh, muscle, windpipe, and artery with brutal efficiency. Blood erupted in a dark fountain, appearing black against the impenetrable gloom. Carson's eyes dilated in horror. He attempted to scream, but only a gush of blood escaped his lips. He clawed wildly at Solomon's face. Solomon held the spike steadfast, gazing into Carson's eyes, witnessing the precious life ebb away. Carson feebly attempted to grasp the spike, to wrench it free, his movements faltering as blood pulsed from his severed artery. His legs buckled. He sank, broken, to his knees. It took 43 agonizing seconds for Carson to die. Solomon counted each one. 43 seconds for 50 lashes. When the last twitch left the body, Solomon withdrew the spike, wiped it clean upon Carson's shirt, then seized the corpse by the ankles and dragged it into the murky depths of the blacksmith shop. He concealed it beneath a mound of coal. Then he ran. He carried 3 things with him: the copper necklace bound securely about his neck, a knife forged by his own hands, and a horse purloined from the stable. He rode south towards Monroeville, 27 miles through the enveloping darkness, urging the stolen horse to its utmost speed. Hooves thundered against the earth. The wind lashed his face, his heart hammering with a tempestuous blend of fear and exhilaration. He had slain a white man. There was no turning back, no absolution, no mercy if captured. Yet, he had also unshackled himself from the most insidious chain of all, the belief that he must passively accept whatever torment was inflicted upon him. He reached Monroeville just as the false dawn began to paint the eastern sky with faint light. He concealed the horse amidst the pines near Bear Creek and waited. Mariah, too, had been in a state of watchful anticipation. She had received whispers of Carson's death even before Solomon's arrival. News, carried on the swift currents of rumor, traveled quickly. A woman selling eggs, her voice hushed, had spoken of it. The overseer at Ashworth's was gone, and traces of blood had been found. Mariah had prepared with meticulous foresight. She had purloined a rifle, using the hidden key. Ammunition, too, had been stolen, 3 bullets at a time, over the course of 2 weeks. 2 horses had been taken. She had packed dried meat and cornmeal, and filled a canteen with water. She had been poised for flight for 3 weeks already. When Solomon emerged at Bear Creek, his form streaked with Carson's dried blood, his eyes wild with the night's dark deeds, Mariah was already there, with 2 horses and their meager supplies. She handed him the rifle, speaking no word. No questions were asked, no horror evinced, only acceptance and immediate action. Solomon's voice trembled. "We cannot return. They will hunt us until we are dead." "I know," she replied. "They will come with dogs, with guns. We shall be hunted like beasts of the field." Mariah's eyes burned with fierce resolve. "Good. Now, let us give them a quarry truly worthy of their hunt. Let us show them the vengeance unleashed when men are pushed beyond the limits of endurance." Solomon gazed at her, perceiving something far deeper than mere anger. Love, transmuted into a formidable weapon. Grief, honed into a sharp strategy. 7 years of suffering, compressed into a searing, focused rage. "I killed him," Solomon confessed. "I killed Carson. I drove a spike into his throat and watched his life extinguish. What does that make of me?" Mariah cradled Solomon's face in both her hands. "That makes you free. Free of the insidious lie that we must accept the indignities they heap upon us. They forged you into a killer. Now let us ensure they regret that creation." They mounted their horses and rode westward towards the Tombigbee River, abandoning 2 plantations to chaos and leaving 2 death warrants suspended above their heads. The death couple was thus forged in blood and firelight, bound by a solemn vow to make their oppressors pay a heavy toll. They would paint southern Alabama crimson. They would transform into a legend that whispered fear into the hearts of children and froze the blood of adults. They would prove, irrevocably, that even chattel could exact a fearsome bite. The Tensaw Swamp, a vast dominion of 60,000 acres, was a watery hell on earth. It sprawled across southern Alabama like a festering wound upon the land, a bewildering maze of ancient cypress trees, their trunks soaring from the inky depths of black water. Spanish moss draped from their limbs like somber burial shrouds. Quicksand, treacherous and deceptive, lay hidden beneath the guise of solid earth. Water moccasins, thick as a man's forearm, glided through the gloom. Alligators, ancient and deadly, capable of cleaving a horse in 2. Mosquitoes, myriad beyond count, coalesced into suffocating clouds. White men shunned this swamp. Even slave catchers recoiled from its embrace. Even those who fled bondage avoided it, for the swamp dealt death with the same cold efficiency as any overseer's whip. But Solomon and Mariah possessed no alternative. Prices, beginning at $500, were already etched upon their heads, a sum representing more wealth than most white men accumulated in 5 years of labor. The swamp became their unassailable fortress. They penetrated its depths 3 days after Carson's demise, approaching from the north and moving stealthily southward toward Perdido Creek. Solomon moved ahead, his keen eyes deciphering the treacherous terrain. Mariah followed, committing the intricate patterns of routes to memory with absolute precision. They discovered a patch of firm ground, a small island, perhaps half an acre in extent, which remained above the water's embrace even amidst the deluge of floods. Massive cypress trees girdled it, their intricate root systems forming impenetrable natural barriers. The island could only be reached by those who possessed the precise knowledge of each precarious step. Solomon fashioned a shelter from fallen cypress branches, lashing them with vines and draping them with Spanish moss. The crude structure, though rudimentary, was functional, elevated 3 feet off the ground on logs to escape the menace of snakes and rising waters. The shelter, from a mere 20 yards, dissolved into the swamp's chaotic tapestry, utterly invisible. Mariah arranged their meager supplies with military exactitude. 1 rifle, 3 pistols, approximately 70 rounds of ammunition, 6 knives, 50 feet of rope, 3 blankets, a cooking pot, flint and steel, dried meat, and cornmeal. They mastered survival in conditions that would claim the lives of most within mere days. They caught fish, using lines painstakingly braided from tough swamp grass. They hunted frogs with sticks honed to a deadly point. They consumed water birds whenever the precious ammunition could be spared. Through meticulous experimentation, they discerned which plants offered sustenance. They drank the swamp's murky water, filtered through cloth, then boiled it when the risk of a betraying fire could be taken. Sometimes, despite their precautions, illness still seized them, racking their bodies with stomach cramps and burning fever. Yet they endured, sustained by sheer stubbornness and grim necessity. They slept in shifts, one ever vigilant, always watching. Trust was a luxury afforded only to those who could bear the cost of error. They could afford none. During the perilous daylight hours when movement was fraught with risk, they meticulously planned their war, a war against the very institution of slavery. Their desire extended beyond mere escape. They yearned for vengeance. They wished to impress upon those who had forged fortunes from human suffering the chilling sensation of fear, the harrowing experience of being hunted, the gnawing uncertainty of whether their world might, this very night, be consumed by fire. The conflagration of Blackwood Plantation erupted 3 weeks after their ingress into the swamp's embrace. It marked their inaugural coordinated strike, their first act of war, their stark announcement to all of Alabama that something fearsome had been brought forth. Blackwood Plantation perched precariously on the eastern fringe of the swamp in Clark County, a scant 10 miles from their hidden island refuge. Joshua Blackwood's name was synonymous with cruelty throughout Alabama, a malevolence that surpassed even the most brutal standards of slavery. He branded enslaved souls with his initials J.B., seared onto their forearms by searing iron. He had once incinerated a man alive for the theft of a mere chicken, forcing all to bear witness to the horror. He worked people until death claimed them, and then simply acquired more. Solomon and Moriah, concealed within the tree line, observed his plantation for 2 days, absorbing every minute detail. 3 overseers, working in shifts. The cotton warehouse, constructed of wood and pine tar. A tinderbox awaiting a spark. The quarters, where the enslaved resided, secured from without at night by a simple padlock. Blackwood dwelled solitary in the main house, attended by only 2 house servants. They launched their strike at 2 o'clock in the morning on November 3rd, beneath the cloaking darkness of a new moon. Solomon approached the warehouse from the north, bearing a torch fashioned from pine branches steeped in animal fat. The warehouse housed the entire year's harvest, some 40,000 pounds of raw cotton, valued at $8,000. Solomon ignited the building's southeast corner with the torch, a point where the wind would eagerly fan the nascent flames. The raw cotton caught fire with the explosive fury of gunpowder. Within 90 seconds, the entire warehouse was consumed by the inferno. Flames 60 feet high clawed at the heavens, visible for miles, transforming the darkest night into an unnatural day. Moriah capitalized on the ensuing chaos to liberate the 37 souls imprisoned within the quarters. She blasted the padlock from its moorings with a pistol shot, the report swallowed by the ravenous roar of the fire. She wrenched the door open, her voice urgent. "Run, scatter in different directions. Seize your freedom, go now!" Most fled instantly, grasping the sudden precious opportunity. A few, paralyzed by years of relentless conditioning, faltered. Moriah seized these hesitant souls, pushing them towards the protective embrace of the woods. "Move now or perish here. These are your only choices." They moved, stumbling at first, then running, dissolving into the welcoming darkness. Joshua Blackwood burst from his house in his nightshirt, screaming incoherently, clutching a rifle, yet utterly incapable of deciding what target to engage. His mind, shattered by the spectacle, could not comprehend the unfolding catastrophe. Solomon lay in wait near the house, precisely positioned for this singular moment. He fired his rifle from 30 yards distance. The bullet found Blackwood's chest, slightly to the left of center, tearing through his sternum and piercing his heart. Blackwood collapsed like a puppet whose strings had been abruptly severed. He died in the dust, his eyes fixed on his burning fortune, his mouth opening and closing like a fish suffocating on dry land. Solomon and Moriah vanished into the darkness along a route etched into memory, leaving in their wake chaos and towering flames, and 37 newly liberated souls scattering into the Alabama night. The repercussions were explosive. The Mobile Register blazoned the headline in the largest type: "Slave Insurrection in Clark County, Plantation Owner Murdered." The article painted a grim vision, a looming cataclysm, akin to the inception of the racial conflagration white Southerners had dreaded for generations. Within mere days, every white soul in southern Alabama knew the names Solomon and Moriah. Whispers painted vivid portraits. He, towering and formidable, a master of weaponry, his movements a phantom's glide. She, petite yet lethal, possessed marksmanship rivaling any seasoned frontiersman, orchestrating their assaults with the meticulous calculus of a military strategist. Plantation owners convened urgent convocations. They fortified their vigilant patrols. They acquired hounds of formidable lineage, trained to cleave to the faintest human essence. They mustered their own armed detachments. They offered rewards, a bounty ever swelling. $500, then $1,000, then $1,500. But Solomon and Moriah continued their relentless assaults with burgeoning audacity. The deadly snare set at Pineapple unfolded 2 weeks after the conflagration at Blackwood. A patrol of 6 men scoured the environs of Pineapple, seasoned manhunters led by Charles Addison, who had apprehended more than 40 fugitives across 15 years. Addison's swaggering hubris masked his peril. He followed hoofprints into the woods, heedless of the possibility of a treacherous lure. Solomon had created those prints that very morning, fastening horseshoes to his own feet, traversing 2 meters in reverse to craft tracks leading into a preordained crucible of death. When the patrol entered the clearing, Mariah was ensconced in a cypress, 30 feet aloft, her rifle loaded, her form shrouded by the somber drapery of Spanish moss, so completely that one could gaze upon her very hiding place, yet perceive no trace. Her inaugural shot found Addison, knowing the fall of the leader would amplify the ensuing terror. The bullet pierced his right eye, erupting from the back of his skull in a ghastly efflorescence of bone and cerebrum. He plummeted from his steed, life extinguished ere he met the earth. The other 5 descended into utter pandemonium. Steeds shrieked and bucked, voices cried out in disarray. One discharged his weapon aimlessly into the verdant canopy. Solomon materialized from the tangled undergrowth, a phantom given sudden form, blade gleaming in his grasp. He seized the nearest rider and wrenched him from his saddle with savage might. The man crashed heavily to the earth, and Solomon cleaved his throat ere consciousness could fully return. A crimson geyser misted Solomon's countenance. Another man aimed his rifle, but Mariah's second shot tore through his shoulder, contorting his frame in a violent pirouette. He dropped the rifle, clasping his ruined shoulder, a scream tearing from his ravaged throat. The remaining 3 scattered in desperate flight, forsaking all succor, urging their horses to a frantic gallop toward Pineapple, there to carry tidings that would transmute the fearsome pair into an enduring legend. Solomon and Mariah secured their hard-won armaments, 2 rifles, 3 pistols, over 100 rounds of ammunition, and 6 horses. They kept the 2 fastest steeds, releasing the others in disparate locations, sowing seeds of vexation and doubt. Were there more people involved? Was this the genesis of a widespread uprising? They made a calculated decision to spare the injured man. A silent corpse yields no testimony, but a survivor's tongue would loosen, describing how the fearsome pair moved with the spectral grace of shadows, fired with a soldier's deadly precision, and struck down foes without a flicker of doubt. Terror, a blade more potent than lead. The newspapers now branded them the Swamp Devils. Church sermons denounced them from pulpits as infernal beings. Politicians clamored for martial intervention. The bounty swelled to $2,000, a sum commensurate with a modest plantation, or the lives of 20 souls in bondage. But despite the colossal reward and the ever-growing throng of pursuers, Solomon and Mariah persisted in their defiant freedom, striking anew. The massacre at Devil's Bend, which transpired on December 1st, marked a pivotal juncture when the pursuit transcended mere regional constabulary action, demanding the full might of military resources. Captain James Morrison was summoned for this singular quarry, the most formidable slave hunter in Alabama, boasting 20 years of grim experience. He had successfully apprehended 40 souls and dispatched a dozen more who dared resist. He bore a storied repute for never relinquishing a cent. Plantation owners pooled their collective fortunes to secure his services, promising $2,000 exclusive of his considerable expenditures. Morrison accepted with an unwavering conviction that verged on absolute assurance. He mustered his renowned dog company, a dozen seasoned trackers and relentless hunters. They brought forth 16 bloodhounds, honed to pursue human scent across the most arduous landscapes. They ventured into the Tensaw Swamp, near the ominous Devil's Bend, on December 1st. Morrison, ever precise, divided his formidable contingent. The hounds followed the elusive trail, while men, rifles poised, kept close behind. Traces of their passage lay scattered everywhere. The ghost of a dying fire, skeletal fish bones, telltale footprints, snapped branches, all speaking of recent habitation, of life recently lived. A grim satisfaction curved Morrison's lips. After 3 weeks of scouring, the elusive quarry was at last within reach. He bade his men brace for imminent confrontation, reminding them these were no ordinary fugitives, but deadly assassins who had already claimed the lives of 20 men. They pressed onward, deeper into the morass, adhering to the faint trail that wound southeast along Pedito Creek. The water, now reaching their thighs, impeded their progress. The towering cypress groves swallowed the sunlight, casting the world into an untimely gloom. It was then that Solomon's deadly stratagem began to claim its toll. The first man ventured onto what appeared to be firm earth. The very earth beneath him gave way. He plunged 10 feet onto a bed of sharpened stakes. His agonizing cries pierced the air as the cruel stakes impaled his legs, abdomen, and chest. He lingered in a protracted agony for 5 minutes, his comrades powerless spectators to his demise. The second man activated a hidden tripwire. A taut sapling, released from its tension, sprang forward like a monstrous catapult, driving a sharpened wooden spike deep into his stomach. He crumpled into the dark water, his lifeblood staining the already somber swamp with a deeper hue of black. The hounds erupted into a frenzy, barking furiously and straining at their leashes. Men discharged their rifles wildly into the elusive shadows. Terror, virulent as a plague, consumed them. Then Mariah unleashed her deadly volley from the verdant shroud of the trees. She had ensconced herself within a cypress tree 30 yards distant, her form enshrouded by Spanish moss. Only the glint of her rifle and the piercing intensity of her eyes betrayed her presence. Serene and precise, this moment, long anticipated, found her ready. Her inaugural shot claimed the life of the dog handler. The bullet, a grim messenger, tore through his throat, felling him instantly. The formidable bloodhounds dispersed in confusion. Her second shot obliterated Patrick O'Reilly's kneecap, sending him plummeting into the water with a shriek of agony, his leg a ruined mess. Her third shot found Thomas Whitmore, Jr. directly in the chest, piercing his very heart. He expired in an instant, his body floating lifelessly, face down. As Mariah maintained their gaze forward with her deadly accuracy, Solomon launched his assault from the rear. His passage through the water, silent as a predator's, a crocodile's stealth, unseen, lethal. His blade sought out throats, backs, and kidneys with merciless efficiency. He struck with savage grace, then vanished once more. In 7 minutes of unadulterated pandemonium, it was over. 9 men lay dead, victims of lead, steel, impalement, and the swamp's dark embrace. 3 were so grievously wounded their only recourse was flight. Morrison himself bore a bullet in his shoulder, yet, bleeding profusely, he managed to flee on horseback, his spirit shattered by horrors far exceeding the grim lessons of 20 years. Solomon and Mariah stood amidst the fallen, their breath coming in ragged gasps, bodies smeared with blood, mud, and the dark water of the swamp. Their eyes met, 2 souls who, born to the cotton fields, had been forged into Alabama's most dreaded adversaries. "This path cannot be sustained indefinitely," Mariah murmured softly. "In time they will unleash the full might of their army." "I understand," Solomon replied. "We must forsake Alabama, venture north, seek the sanctuary of Union lines." Solomon's fingers brushed the copper necklace at his throat, now imbued with the crimson stain of battle. "One more," Solomon declared. "John Whitmore, the man who claimed ownership of your very being. Once he falls, then we depart." Mariah pondered his words, a weighty silence stretching between them. John Whitmore yet drew breath, still held 70 souls in cruel bondage, still amassed his fortune from their endless agony. One more, then liberty awaits us. Unbeknownst to them, the sands of their defiance had but 10 days left to fall. December 10th, 1862. The Devil's Bend massacre sent tremors of profound dread throughout Alabama. 9 seasoned hunters vanquished in 7 fleeting minutes. Morrison wounded and utterly disgraced. The dog company shattered beyond repair. The governor, in his alarm, issued an urgent proclamation. The bounty escalated to $3,000, a price upon their heads, living or dead. Confederate military units were authorized to lend their formidable aid. Martial law descended upon 3 counties. Every able-bodied white man found himself conscripted into the relentless patrols. But more significantly, a chilling terror gripped the white populace, an apprehension unlike any they had known. Solomon and Mariah had demolished the very cornerstone of white supremacy. They had demonstrated irrefutably that those in bondage possessed the power to resist, to strike down, to emerge victorious. Their existence could no longer be tolerated. Dawned upon him. Solomon and Mariah chose their targets with deliberate intent, favoring plantations notorious for their extreme barbarity. No act of theirs was born of chance. They adhered to a fearsome yet discernible code of justice. Morrison delved into their pasts. He uncovered the fact that Maria had been sold to John Whitmore in the year of 1855, and that Thomas Whitmore, Jr., whose life ended at Devil's Bend, was the progeny of this very man. If the son's pursuit was worthy of his demise, then the father's bond to Maria's vengeance must be undeniable. Her wrath would surely be aimed at Whitmore, a singular target. Morrison laid his insidious snare. He disseminated a calculated falsehood amongst captured fugitives. John Whitmore was planning to sell everyone on his plantation to a Mississippi planter famed for his ruthless practice of working souls to their early graves. The sale, the rumor declared, would transpire on December 15th. All 70 souls would be torn asunder, condemned to the most abysmal fates. The tale was an utter fabrication, but Morrison knew it would percolate through the clandestine veins of communication. He knew it would find its way to Solomon and Maria. He knew Maria would learn of her former companions being condemned to a living hell. He knew they would inevitably arrive, and he would stand poised, awaiting their desperate charge. December 12, 1862, at the stroke of midnight, Solomon and Maria arrived at the Whitmore plantation. Their journey from the swamp had been a grueling gallop, laden with the sum of their grim acquisitions. 2 rifles, 4 pistols, multiple knives, and 6 crude implements of destruction, glass bottles brimming with gunpowder sealed with wax, each fitted with a cloth wick. An unsettling pall hung over the plantation from the moment it met their gaze, an unnatural hush, a pervasive gloom. No vigilant patrols stirred, no hound's bark broke the stillness, the master's dwelling utterly consumed by shadows. "A disquieting aura pervades this place," Maria breathed, her voice a mere wisp. Solomon, too, felt the chill of presentiment. This felt like the very maw of a snare. Yet, if the dire whispers of the sale held truth, they could not abandon 70 souls to a fate more wretched than their present bondage. They meticulously surveyed the landscape. The grand house crowned a gentle hill, the quarters nestled downhill to the left, the barn and cotton warehouse flanking the right. Solomon proposed their customary method. Ignite the warehouse to foment pandemonium, liberate the enslaved from their quarters amidst the ensuing disarray, then melt away before any concerted reprisal could coalesce. Maria assented, yet a profound disquiet lingered within her. If this was a trap, the flames, though chaotic, would instantly betray their presence. Solomon recognized the inherent peril, yet perceived no other viable course. Their choices were stark, to act or to retreat, the latter condemning those who might yearn for their aid. They decided to advance with circumspection, bound always as one, ever as one. They glided like wraiths through the encroaching shadows toward the cotton warehouse, aided by the cloak of night and their intimate familiarity with the grounds. This very plantation had been a canvas for their past reconnaissance during Maria's lamentable tenure there. It was then, with a chilling finality, that the trap sprung shut. Lanterns, as if by sorcery, erupted into brilliant life all around them. A daunting circle of dozens, wholly encompassing their desperate stand. Solomon and Maria whirled, rifles readied, their backs pressed together in a desperate vigil, seeking a path of escape that did not exist. They stood encircled by no fewer than 25 armed men, planters, relentless bounty hunters, grim Confederate soldiers, and local militia, a formidable phalanx. Each man held aloft a rifle or pistol, its deadly maw fixed upon the beleaguered pair at the circle's heart. Captain Morrison advanced, his left arm suspended in a sling, a testament to his recent wound. His visage was gaunt, etched with strain, yet his voice remained eerily composed. "Solomon and Maria, you are held in arrest for the grievous crimes of murder, arson, and insurrection against the sovereign state of Alabama." Solomon, defiant, leveled his rifle, its bead fixed upon Morrison's temple. "Come then, and claim us." Morrison, with chilling equanimity, articulated the stark mathematics of their predicament. "You are outnumbered 25-2. Perhaps 30 rounds remain between you both. We, however, command over 300. You stand exposed, bereft of any sanctuary. Should you choose to resist, your lives will be forfeit in mere seconds." He presented them with a choice: surrender and face the due process of a trial, or resist and be cut down like rabid cur. Mariah's laughter, a harsh, bitter sound, met the mention of a trial. "We shall swing from a gallows before the dawn," she retorted. Morrison conceded the likely truth of her words. The statutes of Alabama were unequivocal regarding those in bondage who dared to slay white men. "Yet," he offered, "at least you shall meet your end with a semblance of dignity, rather than being shot down and left to the carrion beasts." Solomon and Mariah's eyes met, and in that silent exchange a lifetime of unspoken words passed between them. 7 years of agonizing separation, 3 months of relentless violence, 20 men fallen, 3 plantations reduced to ash, over 50 souls unshackled, all leading to this ultimate impasse. Encircled, overwhelmingly outnumbered, outmatched in firepower, they confronted a choice between swift demise or a lingering death preceded by profound degradation. Mariah's voice, a tender whisper meant only for Solomon's ears, broke the silence. "My love, I cherished you from the tender age of 9. Every sacrifice, every defiant act was rendered precious because we faced it as one." Solomon returned her declaration, his heart echoing hers, affirming that these 3 preceding months had unveiled a liberty more profound than any he had ever known. He would embrace death 1,000 times over ere he suffer the chains of bondage once more. They faced Morrison and his formidable ring of armed men once more. Solomon's voice, clear as a bell and imbued with unyielding strength, resounded through the night. "We shall never yield. We shall never again endure the ignominy of chains. We shall fight without quarter until our final breath escapes us." Mariah raised her rifle, its grim silhouette mirroring Solomon's, her voice intertwining with his. As one, they cast aside surrender, defied subjugation, repudiated the very essence of slavery's tyranny. Morrison exhaled slowly, a man resigned to an anticipated denouement. "Fire at will," he commanded. The fusillade erupted from all quarters as one, 25 rifles spewing their deadly contents into the beleaguered center. The sound, a cacophony of annihilation, deafened, as if thunder had been distilled into a single, cataclysmic instant. Solomon and Mariah, with a desperate synergy, moved as one. They instinctively plummeted, evading the initial storm of lead. Solomon hurled one of their crude bombs toward the thickest cluster of their assailants. The bottle shivered against a tree trunk, its gunpowder detonating in a blinding flash that momentarily stole the sight from all. Mariah discharged her rifle at Morrison, her aim fixed on his head, but Morrison, swift as a viper, had sought the sanctuary of cover. Her bullet, denied its primary target, struck the man beside him instead, a planter whose features were obliterated in a gory mess. They dashed toward the breach in the suffocating circle forged by the blinding explosion, a desperate bid for freedom, though in their hearts they knew the endeavor was likely forlorn. Solomon clasped Mariah's hand as they fled. Leaden projectiles whizzed past, some whispering inches from their forms, others tearing into tree trunks, rending bark into splintered shrapnel. They wove a frantic serpentine path, employing every art of evasion they had mastered. A bullet merely kissed Solomon's shoulder, drawing forth a crimson bloom, yet failed to impede his relentless flight. Another slug ripped through Mariah's garment, a hair's breadth from her leg. They gained the cotton warehouse. Solomon flung another of his crude incendiaries at its foundation. The gunpowder flared, greedily consuming the parched cotton and dry pine wood. In moments, the hungry flames began to feast and spread. The raging conflagration sowed disarray amongst their pursuers. Some ceased their firing, lest they strike their own comrades. Others rushed forth, intent on quelling the burgeoning inferno. Their disciplined ranks dissolved into utter bewilderment. Solomon and Mariah seized those fleeting, precious seconds to race toward the quarters of the enslaved. If only they could liberate the imprisoned souls, ignite further pandemonium, perhaps, just perhaps, they might yet survive. Yet the odds were insurmountable. Too many hunters, too many muzzles, too many projectiles in the air. Solomon felt the grievous impact, a searing blow to his left leg. The bullet pulverized his femur, sending him crashing heavily to the earth, his leg crumpling beneath him. She seized Solomon beneath his arms. Beginning to drag him toward the meager shelter afforded by the quarters. More leaden missiles tore into the earth around them, churning up dust and debris. A bullet found Mariah's side, carving a painful path through muscle, yet sparing her vital organs, though the agony was excruciating. She gasped, a sharp, choked sound, yet her grip on Solomon remained resolute. They reached the sanctuary behind the quarters, momentarily escaping the direct line of fire. The structure offered but scant protection, yet it was a respite, however fleeting. Solomon cast his gaze upon his ruined leg. Bone, stark white, pierced the ravaged flesh. Blood pulsed from the wound, a relentless, life-draining rhythm. He knew, with grim certainty, that this wound portended death, even with the benefit of meticulous medical attention. Amidst the inferno of a firefight, it was an absolute sentence of doom. "Leave me," he urged Moriah, his voice raw with the torment he endured. "You can yet escape amidst the confusion wrought by the flames, melt into the embracing darkness. Seek the swamp. Live." Moriah rejected his plea with the fierce conviction of her very soul. "Together or not at all," she declared. "Those are the only choices fate affords us." Solomon attempted to reason. "One of us must endure. One must bear witness to our struggle, live to recount our tale. One must attain freedom." Moriah cut him short. She drew her pistol, swiftly assessing its meager complement of 4 remaining bullets. She pressed another pistol into Solomon's hand, his own holding perhaps 3 rounds. "We shall make every shot count," she vowed. "We shall claim as many as we can before the inevitable. We shall fall fighting, as we have lived." The pursuers were reorganizing, preparing for a final decisive assault. Morrison's voice, amplified by his resolve, cut through the din of gunfire and the hungry roar of the blazing warehouse. He extended one last, chilling offer of surrender. If they yielded now, he pledged, their hanging would be clean. No torment, no disfigurement. Merely a swift journey to oblivion at the rope's cruel embrace. Solomon and Moriah's reply was a defiant volley of gunfire. The ultimate assault commenced with the dawn's faint glow. The sun, a nascent blush in the eastern sky, painted enough light to grant precision to their aim. 20 men advanced upon the quarters, converging from 3 directions. They moved with practiced deliberation, utilizing every scrap of cover, their fire a coordinated, deadly ballet. These were battle-hardened veterans, soldiers who had tasted the bitterness of combat, hunters who had tracked the most savage beasts, men for whom the act of killing was a practiced, efficient art. Solomon and Moriah fought with the raw desperation of souls who knew their end was nigh, yet scorned an easy demise. Moriah, with grim resolve, shot a man advancing from her left. Her bullet found his chest, and he crumpled. Solomon, in turn, felled another from the right, his shot tearing into the man's stomach. The man fell, screaming, but their numbers were overwhelming. For every adversary they struck down, 3 more surged forward. Their precious bullets dwindled rapidly. Solomon's ravaged leg bled so profusely that his vision began to cloud, blurring the world into a painful haze. Moriah's side wound continued to seep, staining her dress with a spreading crimson. When Solomon's pistol clicked a hollow empty, he hurled the useless weapon at his closest assailant, seizing his knife in its stead. When Moriah's last bullet found its mark, she followed suit. They stood, backs pressed together, behind the quarters, each clutching a knife, both bleeding and grievously wounded, confronting 24 armed men who inexorably closed in for the kill. This was their chosen end. Together, their spirits unbowed, their struggle unyielding. Morrison advanced with measured steps, his rifle held steady, its muzzle fixed on Solomon's head. His voice, surprisingly, held a grudging respect. "You have fought with uncommon valor," he intoned, "surpassing all expectation. You have claimed more lives, wrought more destruction, and endured longer than any fugitives in Alabama's grim annals. Yet, the struggle is concluded. Lay down your blades and embrace the inescapable." Solomon and Moriah exchanged one last profound gaze. Moriah's fingers found the copper necklace adorning Solomon's throat. He, in turn, brushed her cheek with tender touch, his bloodied hand leaving a faint crimson imprint upon her skin. They turned once more to face Morrison, raising their knives in grim defiance. The ultimate fusillade of gunfire reverberated across the Whitmore plantation, even as the nascent sun crowned the horizon, staining the heavens a hue as scarlet as fresh blood. Solomon was the first to fall, his body riddled with lead, collapsing forward into the very earth he had toiled upon his entire life. Mariah followed mere seconds after, her hands still yearning for his, even as the spark of life departed her frame. The white men who had brought their end stood in a profound, lingering silence, their gaze fixed upon the two fallen forms, as if unable to fully comprehend the cessation of such a formidable struggle. 22 white men had perished over 3 tumultuous months. 4 plantations lay scarred by fire or ruin. Tens of thousands of dollars in property had been laid to waste. More than 50 souls had found liberation from bondage, all wrought by the hands of 2 individuals who scorned the very notion of their shackles. Captain Morrison commanded that the bodies be conveyed to Mobile, there to be publicly exhibited, a grim testament and a dire warning to any who might harbor thoughts of resistance. Yet, an unforeseen turn of events transpired during their conveyance. The wagon bearing their lifeless forms was assailed on the road between Monroeville and Mobile. 20 liberated black people, some having found freedom through Solomon and Mariah's own hands, others simply galvanized by the whispers of their saga, ambushed the conveyance in the stark light of day. They dispatched the guards, reclaimed the hallowed remains, and vanished into the labyrinthine depths of the Tensaw Swamp. Solomon and Mariah found their final resting place together on the secluded islet where they had forged 3 months of defiant life. Their grave, a humble mound, was graced only by a simple wooden cross, etched with their names in the fleeting span of their years. The copper necklace, a silent witness to their bond, was interred with them, Solomon's hand still clasped protectively around it. Yet their narrative did not conclude with their demise, for tales of profound significance possess an immortality that transcends mortal breath. In the months that unfurled after December of 1862, murmurs began to ripple through the enslaved communities across Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia. Whispers swore of Mariah, alive and spectral, gliding through the swamps by night, guiding cadres of fugitives northward toward the sanctuary of Union lines. Still others avowed she was schooling those newly freed in the ancient arts of wilderness survival, in the fierce methods of resistance, in the very tenets of freedom. She became renowned as the Widow of Fire, a haunting specter materializing whenever hope's ember flickered weakest. Her ingenious tactics, the concealed traps, the swift ambushes, the strategic deployment of fire and pandemonium, were emulated by other defiant souls across the breadth of the South. Convoys of armed black people commenced their assaults upon the most barbarous plantations, employing the very strategies Solomon and Mariah had forged. The legend of the fearsome pair traversed far beyond the borders of Alabama. In hushed secrecy, the enslaved sang ballads of their deeds, preserving their saga as an oral heirloom. They sang of the stalwart blacksmith and the skilled seamstress who embraced death over bondage, who struck down their oppressors without quarter, who affirmed the very possibility of resistance even when hope itself seemed but a phantom. When the crucible of the Civil War concluded in 1865 and the scourge of slavery was at last vanquished, many of those liberated by Solomon and Mariah stepped forth, their voices eager to recount their harrowing tales. They spoke of that fateful night when the fearsome duo set Blackwood Plantation ablaze and gifted them their liberty. They bore witness to the boundless courage of 2 souls who had laid down all for the sake of justice. The saga of Solomon and Mariah stands as a stark admonition that oppression begets defiance, that cruelty invites retribution, that every edifice of malice harbors the very seeds of its own undoing. It whispers that love, when forged by necessity, can become a formidable weapon, that 2 souls, armed with naught but unwavering resolve and the unwavering strength found in each other, possess the power to sunder the very foundations of the most entrenched dominions. It echoes the truth that liberty is never bestowed. It is seized, often at a fearsome cost, by those brave enough to clamor for its embrace. And it is a testament to the truth that certain bonds defy dissolution by chains, by the vast expanse of distance, by the relentless march of time, or by the cold embrace of death itself, that some loves persist beyond the grave, inscribed upon the scrolls of history, immutable as chiseled stone. Solomon and Mariah met their end at the tender ages of 18 and 16 years. Yet, in those 3 months of audacious freedom, they tasted a fullness of life that eludes many across an entire lifetime of timid safety. They embraced violence over meek submission. They chose death over the ignominy of chains. They chose each other over the mere instinct of survival. The copper heart, interred within the Alabama swamp, has long since vanished, consumed by the relentless currents of time and water. But their story endures, whispered down through generations, a vibrant testament to resistance, to enduring love, and to the unwavering refusal to accept the monstrous lie that some souls are destined to hold sway over others. The fearsome pair claimed the lives of 20 men, liberated 53 souls, and set ablaze 3 plantations. But more importantly, they slew the lie of white supremacy in the hearts of all who heard their tale. And that legacy cannot be buried.